This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
So this afternoon, the news came down that the Cleveland Browns would be moving on from Alex Van Pelt and a number of offensive coaches. And while this news was a little surprising in its timing, it's not necessarily surprising, and it does mean a few things going forward for not just Kevin Stefanski, but for the Cleveland Browns and what direction that they're going in. Now, in the staff shakeup on the offensive side, the Browns have gotten rid of longtime running back coach Stump Mitchell. They have not renewed the contract of tight ends coach T.C. McCarthy, among others. I don't see the wide receiver coach on here. I feel like the Browns should have replaced him a long time ago, but we'll see. I doubt he makes it through the transition, but those are the two that we know are out for sure. Is Stump, Alex Van Pelt, and T.C. McCarthy, probably more position coaches as well. And the reason I say this makes a ton of sense is, one, it was something we talked about where the adjustments that they made to kind of morph the offense with Deshaun required more imagination than what they were willing to go to, right? They weren't willing to kind of get past some elements. They weren't super imaginative with the offense with Deshaun. When Joe Flacco's out there and they can just run that old thing, they can do that well, right? We can run that West Coast offense and we could do that well and all good, but Joe Flacco ain't going to take you to the Super Bowl at 38 years old. The hope is that Deshaun Watson's good enough to take you to the Super Bowl. It's what you paid and traded for. And in order for you to get to the Super Bowl, if you're the Cleveland Browns, whether people like it or not, it's going to take, at this point, on this iteration of the roster, unless the Browns luck into another quarterback, it's going to take Deshaun Watson being the guy. In order for Deshaun Watson to be the guy, I do think you need to make some changes on the offensive side of football. Now, whether those changes will be made, I thought it was very obvious if Deshaun finished the season and continued to put up underwhelming statistics, that a change would have been made on the offensive side of the ball. I did not know if they would continue to make the change, despite the fact that they had some offensive success with Joe Flacco at the end. But they have gone forward and decided to make that change. So what does that mean? One, that means that they're as dedicated to Deshaun Watson as they were last year. And I said it in the video that released early this morning, that the Browns are going to try everything they can do this year to make it work with Watson, right? Like, this is going to be we got to do everything, give no excuse to make this work with Watson year. They're going to bring in wide receivers he's familiar with. They're going to bring in offensive coaches he's familiar with their concepts. They're going to work that way with Deshaun Watson. They're going to try to make this perfect for him. So there's no room for error. There's no room for excuses. They can figure out whether this is the dude or whether they got to start making moves to move on at the quarterback position, starting with next year's draft. This year is so important when it comes to Deshaun Watson's future, especially Deshaun Watson's future as a Cleveland Brown, but honestly, his future as an NFL player. Because if he shows up this year, the Browns will continue to bet on him. If he does not show up this year, I think the Browns are going to continue to try to move on. Well, not continue, but they're going to make some overt moves to move on from him, including being open to drafting a quarterback in the first round next year. So this is why you want to give him the best shot possible. Is it fair to Alex Van Pelt? It's business. It really is business. Look, Alex Van Pelt did a fine job. And if you want to run the West Coast offense, Alex Van Pelt is your guy. But what this team and what this staff needed, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and we talked about this during the season, especially Jake Burns. And Jake Burns is somebody who I believe and trust to be one of the most knowledgeable people talking about this, especially on the offensive side of the ball out there. He always emphasized to me that they need to bring in more guys. They need to bring in more diverse thought. They need to bring in guys with expertise in other areas than this West Coast offense. And what we're seeing is the Browns making a big move to move some of their expertise on the offensive side of the ball off of the West Coast offense and into some different concepts. Now, there are some guys out there. We're going to go over the list of coordinators later today that the Browns might potentially bring in. Now, there's a question of people asking why now that Alex Van Pelt get fired. I think the answer to that question is very simple. It's simply because it's the end of the season. I don't think that the Browns fired Alex Van Pelt in reaction to a playoff game, like some people are insinuating that has happened. I don't think Alex Van Pelt, I don't think there was much that Alex Van Pelt was going to do to save his job. Because, again, I know some people fooled themselves into thinking that the Browns might move on to like Joe Flacco or something like that because of the success that he was having versus Deshaun Watson's lack of that statistical success, despite being very good win-loss wise. I know some people talk themselves into it, so they think this is a reaction to that, but I don't think it's a reaction to that. I think that this move was made in the Browns' mind, at least in the organization's mind and Kevin Stefanski's mind, probably the second Deshaun Watson went out for the season. This is a Deshaun Watson decision, right? This is a decision made to build the offense around Deshaun Watson. This is a decision made to better cater the offense to some of the strengths of Deshaun Watson. And not just Deshaun Watson, but modern quarterbacks, right? Like the West Coast offense, we've seen Kyle Shanahan do great things with it. But even Kyle Shanahan's version of that West Coast offense is much more modern than the Cleveland Browns version of it. We don't run a ton of motion. We don't do a ton pre-snap. There was just a lot of areas, even if you were just focused on the West Coast aspect of this offense, where we were behind. Like, on one hand, it was great that Joe Flacco could come in and run this offense immediately. But it should concern you, or it should have concerned us. And if we look back at it retroactively, it was something worth concern that Joe Flacco could walk into this offense and learn it immediately, because it basically is the same exact unchanged thing that he ran 10 years ago. Right? Like, they needed to evolve. They needed to get more even if they want to continue to run the West Coast offense, they needed to evolve this thing into what it's become in the 21st century. And the Browns just have not been able to do it. Remember the stuff we were complaining about in the middle of the season? No motion. We're not motioning enough. We're not moving guys. We're not doing any of these things that we're seeing Shane Steichen do or Eric Bieniemy do. We're not doing enough with play action. The play action just isn't creative enough. We're not moving guys off the ball with that play action. And when Joe Flacco was in there, you were getting some movement on play action, but you were also playing worse defenses. And then you played a good team in the Texans, and we saw what happened, right? So a lot of things just needed to change on that offensive side of the ball. Get more modern. The Browns RPO stuff, like, we complained about that almost all year. The fact that they had Deshaun Watson in there, or even when they had DTR in there, and they didn't do much RPO. Like, they needed to evolve this offense. And it was clear to me that they didn't have the minds on the offensive committee to make that happen. Right? When they tried to bring in all this stuff with Deshaun in 2021, and then they had to get rid of it immediately, that was a concern, right? This is about making sure that the marriage of quarterback and coach works out, and Kevin moving on from his longtime collaborator in Alex Van Pelt, and moving towards somebody with a different approach on the offensive side of the ball, maybe, or maybe a similar approach, but more advanced on the offensive side of the ball, will I think be something that greatly benefits this team in the long run. So Alex Van Pelt is out as offensive coordinator. Long story short, I think this has a lot to do with the team wanting to, one, make the offense more modern, two, build an offense around a modern quarterback, right? Like, as great as it is that Joe Flacco was able to have success, we can't bet on pulling quarterbacks from 10 years ago into the offense in order to make it work. We got to have something modern, right? We got to have something that a DTR and a Deshaun Watson can run a bit more efficiently and effectively. We got to have that, or else we have no chance in the playoffs, right? As we saw this year, quarterback matters, and you got to get the most out the quarterback position. And this is a bold step by the Cleveland Browns, right? Because nobody would have gotten mad at them if they would have kept Alex Van Pelt at all. I don't think anybody would have been mad. I think we all kind of expected it. Maybe they make a change at quarterback coach or something. Nobody would have been mad if they would have kept Van Pelt as the offensive coordinator. But to move on from him still, when nobody is demanding it, that's a bold move. That's a bold move. Now, we've seen other organizations make similar bold moves, and it worked out. The Ravens with Greg Roman, even though people were asking for that. But the Ravens did this on the defensive side of the ball with Wink Martindale, where people weren't really asking for him to be fired. They wanted Greg Roman to be fired, but they fired Wink Martindale the year before they fired Greg. And then they hired TJ McDonald, and it was an amazing change for them. This is a step, I think, in the right direction. It depends on who they hire. We'll talk about who might be available for the Cleveland Browns to hire in a video later today. But I just wanted to get my thoughts out there about Alex Van Pelt being let go and why I think that this is a step in the directions I stated earlier. Like, I think this is just a move to make sure that you're building things efficiently around the quarterback. And look, you've committed. He's got to stay healthy, but you want to build it towards a more modern approach, regardless of Deshaun's the quarterback. I mean, not if he's the quarterback, but regardless of if Deshaun is playing well or not, you still want to have a more modern offense than what you had last year. But that's my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.